Hello, dear friends. We are to speak about Mr. Roberto Ragone, who is a very important person, let's say, about art and writing. And the world is bigger. We were speaking together before starting this interview, but it's a smaller one. We are in Tirana, in Europe, and Mr. Ragone is in US. Thank you for accepting this interview.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. So, who is following us for sure must know to whom we are speaking. Who is Mr. Vito Marcantonio?
Yes, so he is a congressman from New York City from the 1930s and 40s. He was a protege of Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, who many people got to know historically, but many people did not know that LaGuardia had a protege who became a congressman who actually replaced LaGuardia when he went from going to Congress to mayor. But he was very much, look, Marcantonio was very much a very controversial person who was ahead of his time and fighting for civil rights and human rights, racial harmony, that all the different ethnicities and religions should get along together in peace. And he also wanted developing nations to have an opportunity for self-determination without the British Empire or other colonial and imperialist factors, to interfere in their lives. So, in fact, he was the only one who voted against the Korean War. So that's very interesting about him. Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Anyway, Marc Antonio, and Marc Antonio are, let's say, important to this interview and to life of humankind. So, why is this play called Purgatory Trial of Vito Marcantonio, your screenplay?
Thank you for asking. So this is a play, and by the way, the Equity, which is the union for theater in New York, they asked they asked the actors to just explain that this Purgatory Trial of Vito Marcantonio is a legitimate production. It has received an off-Broadway designation, which is just one shy of being a Broadway production. And so it's called the Purgatory Trial of Vito Marcantonio because Vito Marcantonio is the only Catholic politician in American history who did not receive a Catholic burial. The Cardinal of New York, Cardinal Spellman, did not give him a Catholic burial. And many people believe that was a very political decision in the 1950s. He died in 1954 because at this point, there was a senator, Joseph McCarthy, who was creating this anti-communist hysteria. Oh, the communists are hiding everywhere. And this person, because he associated with this person, he must have been a communist and this and that. So Cardinal Spellman felt like, it's my understanding is that because Marcantonio defended the First Amendment rights of communists to speak when he was associated with very left of center elements, which was now considered the old left, which was fighting for like working class rights, and a lot of times the church associates people like that with atheism, right? He conveniently made this political decision to not give him a Catholic burial. So the idea is that I as the character can speak to a modern audience because I'm in limbo. I'm in purgatory. There's no finite decision that's been made whether to put me in heaven or hell. Mm-hmm. So that became the idea.
And tell us, how did you became interested in acting in such case?
In this particular topic?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting that I first learned about him in an African American history class because he fought against the laws that were in the books that you were charged a fee to vote, and you could lynch African Americans. Like that was a much more prominent thing happening back in the 1930s and 40s. So I thought, oh, look at this guy. He's fighting for civil rights. He's got a very cool Italian name, but he kept reoccurring in my life, right? So like this one lady told me about how he helped her, and she was from the Caribbean. And then I read an article about him. And then I went to a friend's wedding in California, and he says, when I get back from the wedding, I'm going to give you a book about a guy who used to talk to his people very directly, and then refer them to the staff to handle the details. And I thought he was going to give me the name of a businessman, but it was Vito Marcantonio. And I'm like, oh my God, you too. For the past 6 years, this guy kept reoccurring in my life. So we ended up having a big academic multimedia event at NYU in 1998, which was his alma mater. And my mentor, this professor who wrote the book on Marcantonio, said, we can't stop there. We have to do other things like walking tours and republish his speeches. But then when he said, and we need a book, we need a film and a play. That's the thing that I stayed focused on. I decided I don't want to just do the academic. I want to do the artistic. And I had already done some acting in theater, and I said to myself, I want to be able to write the script and do the play and the film, and I want to be Vito Marcantonio. And I studied the way he spoke and the way he walked and the way he would gesture with his hands.
Mhm.
So and then there was this one time where the professor said to me, "Well, why don't you actually, instead of dramatizing his speeches, why don't you talk to him like you're talking to a modern audience?" And I said, "That's a good idea because we could say he's coming back from purgatory, right? Because he never got a Catholic burial." So at first, I would do these things at a restaurant event where it was 5 to 10 minutes. And then the guy who directed this show, asked me to do a small something for a theater festival, and that was 20 minutes. And then we said, we got to make this whole thing a complete play. And now we finally were able to bring it off Broadway. And you're giving me the opportunity to talk about it.
Yes, but tell us, so you can tell to the followers of us, to our channel in YouTube, where is being this uh, current play produced?
Yes. So it's at the American Theater of Actors in New York City at the Sargent Theater. There's like the bunch of theaters in the theater itself. So it's the Sargent Theater. That's at 314 West 54th Street. And if you go to eventbrite.com, you could find out the remaining times. But it ran from it's running from October 4th to October 15th. So this Sunday is the last production. Tonight is 8 p.m. To Saturday is 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. and Sunday is 3 p.m. And hopefully, any of your followers in New York will come and see it. So I know there's a lot of interest in the Italian community within the Albanian community. They many Albanians, for instance, have worked hand in hand with Italians. They've moved into Italian neighborhoods, and I think they're very much interested in Italian culture. So
Sure.
hopefully they, many Italians and non-Italians will come and see the show.
It's good. So let us speak about you. Have you other role played? Can you speak about your career, a professional career a little?
Yes. So, for instance, I started off in theater, and I took up my first class was really with an acting teacher, and I was trying to just learn how to be more a better public speaker and a conversationalist. And then he had something called acting for non-actors, and I took that, and then I would start to do little scenes, and then eventually, me and the guy who was directing my play, we acted together in a play, the very famous play called The Odd Couple, where he plays the sloppy sportscaster, and I play the neat freak, a cultured opera fan. And then I started to do more and more plays. And then he would start his own production company and do theater, and then I would do be in his plays. But a lot of the roles that I tend to get, right, are either as the detective, right? It's a very varied. I get the roles of like a detective, such as in this this dramatic series called Vishmerik, to the mob guy, the head of the mafia, in some instances, and a lot of times, so I could either be the mob boss or the sloppy guy that gets himself killed right away. So I could almost play the opposite ends of the spectrum, and so it's very funny. But one of the things that I've also noticed that I get is I always get a lot of times there's a role in a film or a play of what's called the mentor, which is the guy who comes along to give the good advice to the main character. So a lot of times I've played the baseball coach, the referee, the dad, the good father, right, or the best friend, or the priest, or somebody who's playing a kind of, or even a homeless person, or a stranger who comes along and gives out very good advice. So these are some of the range of different roles that I've played.
My compliment. Anyway, we spoke about your roles, about your screenplay. May we speak about you yourself? Your name says you are an Italian guy, Roberto Ragone. And
Ragone,
I
right.
think Ragone. And I think it is important to speak about you, your life as American Italian guy.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the way you pronounce my last name so properly, Ragone, which is how they say it in Europe and in Italy. In America, sometimes you had to grow up with Ragone, and it's stuck. But people in America are catching up. But I was born in New York. My parents are both from Salerno, right? There's a town called Teggiano in the valley, in the city of Salerno, which is part of the province of Campania, which is the same region that has Naples. And I was born here, but we lived in Italy. We moved to Italy when I was 2.5 years old. And so Italian was the first language I was exposed to. And then I came back to New York when I was 5 years old, because my mother felt it was very important that because we were born in America, we should be raised in America. So I was snuck into kindergarten, and my sister was snuck into first grade. She never went to kindergarten. And first we only spoke Italian, and then we spoke English. And it's funny. I'll tell you one thing. If you look at a picture of me when I was a little child in Italy, and you compare it to the image of the little child in Cinema Paradiso, right? I look like the same kid. I'm like, oh my God, that's me in the movies, right? So, but then I grew up here, and I always felt it important to. I had a very good high school teacher who taught about the Roman Empire and the Renaissance and the Risorgimento of Italy, right? The Italian peninsula, and I was very proud of that, and I always felt like I wanted to share Italian culture with people from other backgrounds, right? Like, so back when I was in high school,
you should be proud being Italian.
What was that?
You should be proud being an Italian, because
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. World a lot of good things.
Absolutely. No, and I think the Europeans.
By the way, possiamo parlare in italiano?
Io spero che tu parli italiano meglio che io, perché io sono un po' fuori di pratica. Però posso improvvisare un po'.
Non lasciar perdere l'italiano, è una lingua musicale, rappresenta una storia culturale immensa per il mondo, non soltanto per la nazione italiana, e poi con gli albanesi siamo vicini, e con gli albanesi l'Italia e l'Albania sono vicini in tutti i sensi, diciamo.
Ci sono molti albanesi che parlano italiano perfettamente in New York, sono bravi per loro, e anche adesso sono padroni di molti ristoranti italiani, bravi per gli albanesi, sì.
Sì. There are a lot of Italian restaurants even in Tirana and in Albania. Anyway, it is good to speak to an Italian guy who speaks yet Italian, because in US it's difficult, I know. Anyway,
I know, exactly. Non si trova. Io anche posso mischiare un poco il dialetto napoletano, perché
per quello io trovo difficoltà a capire.
sì, sì.
Mi sembra iraniano, mi sembra.
Però quelle arie, the arias, right? Quelle canzoni, Solo mio e Ritorna a
Sole
Sorrento,
mio è un
sono
amico che
napoletane,
parla
sì, sì.
tutte le lingue, quella.
Sì, sì.
La musica parla tutte le lingue, è internazionale. Okay, it was a pleasure to have an interview
Yes.
with you and to mention you are an Italian-American guy and an Italian-American artist, let's say, like Rocky Balboa, who has been in Italy recently.
Exactly. Can I tell you? I'll say, Tony, it's interesting that you mentioned Rocky Balboa. Let me say this: that Sylvester Stallone and another gentleman, Chaz Palminteri, who did Bronx Tale. One of the reasons that they're inspiring to me, besides the fact that they're Italian American, right, is that they wrote a script, and they said, "I'm not going to sell this script unless I insist that I play this particular role." In the case of Sylvester Stallone, it was Rocky, to play Rocky, and in the case of Chaz, who had done a one-man show on Bronx Tale, like I'm doing a one-man show, he insisted on playing a Sal, and Robert De Niro respected that. So that's one of the reasons, by the way, that I write as well as act. I wrote this particular play. So, and here's if you want to look at this is the
Purgatory
playbill.
trial with Vito Marcantonio.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. So there you are. This playbill shows it's a legitimate off-Broadway show. So thank you very much for having me. Much
It's a
appreciated.
pleasure, and you must know we are now, while we are doing this interview, in the US Culture Week in Albania, because it includes, yeah. So this interview can suit with week, which is US Culture. US Embassy here organize a lot of activities, a lot of concerts, cinema, and maybe next year you can be invited there.
Oh, absolutely. I'll give you an update.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
A pleasure. And my
Thank you.
compliment for what you are doing.
Thank
It
you.
was the
And my
interview, dear
compliments to
friends.
Eleanor, who mentioned you.
Yeah.
I kudos to all your accomplishments.
Yeah. Anyway, saying hello even to Elena. Now we can say who follows this interview can follow by internet, or who is in US, even in live way. So it is a pleasure for me to say goodbye to you. Bye,
Thank you.
Artur.